Good morning and good evening to everyone around the world. Welcome back to another episode of the Puck Drop Podcast, where we will be recapping week 16 of the NHL season, the last full week before the All-Star break. A lot of teams are already headed into their break, but there are a few more games left this week before the weekend festivities in Toronto. But for now, let's dive right into the action from week 16. And like always, there's a whole lot to talk about. So sit back, turn up the volume, crack open those caffreys, and enjoy the ride. Let's start off with our standings as of January 30th. The Vancouver Canucks and Boston Bruins are leading the Western and Eastern Conferences respectively, both with 71 points in 49 games. The Boston Bruins are the last remaining team in the NHL with single-digit losses. Following these two teams are the Colorado Avalanche, who have the best offense in the NHL and also the best home record. They are 20-5 at home and leading the way with goals for, 190 goals on the season. And right after them, the best road team in the NHL, the Florida Panthers, who are 17-7-2 on the road. I've talked about them a bunch the last few weeks. They're a red-hot team, one of the strongest and most intimidating teams in the Eastern Conference, no doubt. And in fifth place behind the Florida Panthers are the Dallas Stars, a team who I really have not talked about much this year. Though they deserve some credit, they're always steady, floating near the top of the standings. A team that I actually have a future on to win the Cup. The only team that I have a future on to win a Cup this year. I know I mentioned a few episodes back in our roundtable discussion that I thought the Rangers would win the Cup, but I never actually put any money on them. I had money on them last year. They let me down in the first round, so I moved my money over to the Dallas Stars. And it's looking like I might have jinxed them with that pick I made a few weeks ago. They're struggling a bit as of late. Shesterkin not really looking like himself. Still first place in the Metropolitan Division. However, they're 4-5-1 in their last 10. Not great. Sorry, Rangers fans. The other Canadian juggernaut we've been talking about in recent weeks, the Winnipeg Jets, ran into a hot goalie this week. A name that I wouldn't expect myself to be saying right now, and that is Ilya Samsonov. He had a bit of a resurgence this week after coming back up from the AHL. Despite losing his first game back with the Toronto Maple Leafs, he went on a 3-game win streak after that, beating Seattle and then the home against Winnipeg. In those 2 games against Winnipeg, he put up a .966 save percentage. Very happy for him. He had some big-time struggles early on in the year. He got sent down for a bit, replaced by Martin Jones. He pretty much killed my fantasy team this year, but making a bit of a comeback, and what a time to do it right before the All-Star break. If he could keep this up, he might have that starting job back in time for the playoffs. I should have actually mentioned this last week, but the Jets went on a 35-game streak without allowing more than 3 goals. That run started November 5th and went until their loss against Boston on January 23rd. So almost 3 full months without allowing more than 3 goals in a game. A pretty incredible stat. Of course, a big part of that is due to Connor Hellebuyck playing out of his mind, and of course, great team defense. We talked about Rick Bowness, how he has the team bought into a system, all 4 lines playing great, pressuring the offense. Everything's working for that team. Of course, they just came off 2 losses. I just mentioned to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but there's nothing to worry about if you're a fan of the Winnipeg Jets. Despite it being a tough division with Colorado and Dallas ahead, I don't see this team at all missing the playoffs, especially if they keep playing the way they do. A minor hiccup in Toronto, but it's a good time to have a little break with the All-Star game, and then they can reset after the weekend and get back to their winning ways. And now a bit further down the list, the Edmonton Oilers. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about every single team in the standings, but the Edmonton Oilers need to be talked about because, of course, they continue to look unstoppable. They now have won 16 games in a row, which is tied for the second most all-time, only behind the 1991-1992 Pittsburgh Penguins. If they win one more game, they tie that all-time record, which is an incredible record. The NHL's been around for over 100 years, and the fact that they might be on the longest winning streak in the history of the league, incredible. They're also the first team in NHL history to go on a 12-game winning streak, allowing 2 or less goals. Since the start of the new year, 2024, they've only allowed 16 goals against in 12 games, which is unreal, especially considering the struggles they had defensively early on in the season, the struggles that Stuart Skinner had early on. He's come back. He's playing some incredible hockey. They also have 50 goals against in the last 25 games, only second to the Winnipeg Jets. So averaging only 2 goals against in the last 25 games, Chris Knobloch deserves a ton of credit for completely revamping this team's defense. I wish I had the stat in front of me. I don't, unfortunately, but they've reduced the opposition's high scoring chances by a ton, really helping Stuart Skinner, keeping shots to the outside. There's just so much we can say about this team. Right now, without a doubt, they are the most dangerous, scariest looking team in the NHL, and just crazy coming off that start, how much they struggled early on. They lost to the San Jose Sharks, who had barely won any games. They won their first game, I think it was their 12th game of the year against the Philadelphia Flyers, and then the following game they beat the Edmonton Oilers, a team that in the offseason was supposed to be a contender. They started atrociously, and they are on fire. Since Chris Knobloch has taken over, the Oilers are 26-6. Incredible. Have I used that word yet? These Oilers are incredible. All right. If I use that word again in this episode, Randy, just beep it out. The Philadelphia Flyers have also had a pretty tough week, losing 5 in a row ever since the Carter Hart news kind of broke out. Them and another team struggling immensely. I'm going to mention that other team later on. Also going to talk more about that Carter Hart stuff later on, so you'll just have to stay tuned until the end of the episode. Let's move on to player stats. The Hart Trophy race this year has just been incredible. Probably the tightest race in a long time. Off the top of my head, I can't remember a race this tight. It's so back and forth between two guys, Nikita Kucherov and Nathan MacKinnon. Kucherov was leading for quite some time, and then MacKinnon surpassed him, only for Kucherov to bounce right back. This week alone, they went back and forth with 4-point games. On January 21st, Nathan MacKinnon had a 4-point night, 2 goals and 2 assists. Then on January 24th, Nikita Kucherov had a 4-point night with a hat trick and an assist. And then the next night, January 25th, Nathan MacKinnon had a 5-point night with 4 goals and an assist. And then the next night, Nikita Kucherov 3 points, a goal and 2 assists. Just crazy. These guys are both neck and neck. I honestly wonder if they are looking at the scoring race. A lot of players say they don't pay attention to NHL standings. They don't pay attention to, the stat sheet, whatever it may be. These guys seem like they are really competing one-on-one because they just keep one-upping each other every night, both playing some incredible hockey, putting up insane numbers. Right now, as we speak, as I'm recording today, Nikita Kucherov is leading the Art Ross race. He's got 85 points in 49 games. Nathan MacKinnon has 84 points in 49 games. Same amount of assists, but Kucherov has 1 extra goal on Nathan MacKinnon. However, I did mention last week, Nathan MacKinnon is leading with even strength points by a wide margin. And seeing how tight the scoring race is and how good both these players are playing, I would give the Hart edge to Nathan MacKinnon right now because of those even strength points. That's a very important stat. Of course, it's very important to score on the power play. Every team wants good special teams, but you play the majority of the game 5-on-5. So for a guy to be able to put up even strength points like he does is invaluable to your team. I mentioned these guys keep going back and forth. Well, in their last 10 games, Nathan MacKinnon has 20 points and Nikita Kucherov has 21 points. So very similar numbers in the last few weeks alone. Nathan MacKinnon does, however, have the longest active point streak with 13 games. Actually, he's tied with Sam Reinhart, but Nathan MacKinnon has 28 points in his last 13 games, over a 2-point per game pace, whereas Sam Reinhart, also 13 game point streak, however, he has 18 points in his 13 games. Now, since we're talking about Sam Reinhart, let's transition over to the Rocket Richard race. Of course, Austin Matthews still leading the way there. He recorded his 40th goal of the season in only his 46th game, which is unreal. This guy had 40 goals last year in 70-something games. I think he played like 76 games, or 74 games, excuse me. He's already tied his last year goal total, and he's only played 46 games. He is on a 71 goal season pace, something that hasn't happened in years. Randy, find when the last time someone got 70 goals was. It might have been the Teemu Selanne, Alexander McGillney year. I could be wrong. Randy's going to look it up for us while I keep going. But Austin Matthews is doing something we haven't seen in over a decade. Randy's got it for me. Yeah, I was right. Okay, it was the 1993 season. Teemu Selanne, rookie Teemu Selanne, and Alexander McGillney both tied with 76 goals. That was the last time a player reached the 70-goal mark. In 96, Mario Lemieux came so close. He got 69 goals. But anyway, it's been my whole life. I'm born in 93, so it's been 30 years. 31 years, actually, now that we're in the 2023-2024 season. since someone has hit the 70 goal mark, and Austin Matthews is on that pace this year. It's just crazy. He could put up goals like Austin Matthews. Honestly, if he keeps up this pace, he might become the best goal scorer of all time. We have been lucky enough for the past 20 years, or, approximately 20 years, to witness Alexander Ovechkin play hockey and look like the greatest goal scorer of all time, considering the time he's playing in and the fact that he might break Wayne Gretzky's record. Well, Austin Matthews right now, he's much younger. He hasn't played nearly as much as Ovechkin. He's looking like he's going to beat that pace and become the greatest goal scorer of all time. Am I jealous that he's in a blue jersey? Absolutely. Am I lucky and glad that I could watch him play hockey? No doubt. Sam Reinhart, who gets a lot of airtime on this podcast, right behind Austin Matthews. He's got 37 goals on the season, and he already surpassed his career high. His career high was 33 goals in a full season, 78 games. Right now, Sam Reinhart has 37 in only 49 games, so he's on pace to absolutely smash his career high in goals. But I got another stat for you. Last week I was talking about his shooting percentage. Well, this week's weekly Sam Reinhart stat is his power play goals. Pretty impressive. He's got 20 power play goals on the season, and that is more than the entire Chicago Blackhawks and the entire Washington Capitals roster, which is crazy, especially the Capitals. Ovechkin is a power play specialist, at least he used to be in his prime. Sam Reinhart has more goals than that entire team, more power play goals, than that entire team. He's also tied with the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Calgary Flames, the Buffalo Sabres, and the San Jose Sharks. He has as many power play goals as those entire teams. Pretty. We are talking about Nathan MacKinnon, how he's good on even strength points, and how that might be more valuable than power play. Well, it's nothing to bat an eye at. Very, very useful having a guy that can score that much on the power play. Also, while we're on Sam Reinhart, might as well mention we talked about how he's tied with Nathan MacKinnon for the longest active point streak. In his 13-game point streak, he's got 14 goals and 18 points. Over a goal per game during his 13-game point streak. Really damn impressive. Trying so hard not to say not too far down the list is Brock Besser, who had his 30th goal of the season last week. His career high, surpassing his rookie season of 29 goals. When he was a rookie, people thought this guy was going to be a stud, one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. He slowed down. He never matched his rookie total until this year. He's got 30 goals in only 49 games, so of course, he has already passed his record, and he will likely smash it by quite a large margin. And that brings me to my next point of other players who are on pace to smash their career highs. Artemi Panarin has 30 goals on the season. His career high is 32. William Nylander has 61 points on the season. His career high is 87. Very likely to beat that record. Carter Verhaeghe has 50 points on the season. His career high is 73. Quinn Hughes has 62 points on the season. His career high is 76. Zach Hyman has 30 goals on the season. His career high is 36. And we mentioned Sam Reinhart, of course, already smashed his career high of 33 goals with his 37th in only 49 games. So just past the halfway mark of the season, it would take a devastating incident for these guys not to break the record, whether it be an injury or just really, really falling off a cliff. I wouldn't bet on it. I would definitely bet against it. These guys are definitely going to pass their career highs. I mentioned earlier how tight the Hart Trophy race is. Well, the Norris Trophy race is also extremely tight, and it has been for even longer, pretty much all season. Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar still neck and neck in terms of defensive scoring. Quinn Hughes leading the way with 62 points in 49 games, while Cale Makar has played 5 less games, but has only 4 less points. The award could go to either one of these guys. I said that last week. I'll say it again. Quinn Hughes, however, does have a plus 34 plus minus, which is a very impressive stat. That, along with his 39 even strength points, would give him the edge, in my opinion. But if you're not convinced, take a look at this next stat. 7 defensemen have between 30 and 40 minutes of puck-on-stick possession in the offensive zone this season. Cale Makar, Roman Josi, Evan Bouchard, Erik Karlsson, Mike Matheson, Adam Fox, Rasmus Dahlin. Those 7 guys are between 30 and 40 minutes. No D-man is over 40 minutes except for Quinn Hughes, who has 54 minutes and 27 seconds of puck on stick possession in the offensive zone. So by a large, large margin, Quinn Hughes controls the play in the offensive zone more than any other defenseman in the NHL this season. So with that, he is leading the Norris race, in my opinion. Taking a look at the rookie scoring race, Connor Bedard is still leading the way, which is very impressive considering how long he's been out for. And unfortunately, we received news that he's going to be out even longer than originally expected. Connor Bedard sustained a fractured jaw on January 5th, and despite seeing him skating, Luke Richardson, the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks, came out and said that he will be injured longer than expected. They initially gave us a report that said 6 to 8 weeks. However, recovery has not gone as planned, and they are now adding approximately 4 weeks onto that. So they're thinking about 6 weeks from the day that Luke Richardson was interviewed, which was last Tuesday. So approximately, I guess, 5 weeks from now is when we should expect, hopefully, a return from Connor Bedard. But nonetheless, very impressive that he still leads the rookie scoring race with 33 points in 39 games. Does that mean he's locked up the Calder Trophy? Possibly. He's definitely still the favorite in terms of Vegas odds. However, if anyone were to surpass him, if anyone were to win the trophy at this point, it would have to be Brock Faber of the Minnesota Wild, because he has come out and had an impressive season, an impressive rookie season. He's got 29 points in 49 games as a rookie, and we mentioned a couple weeks ago with the Wild sustaining many injuries, especially on the back end. He came in and took a major role for the team, plays over 24 minutes a game, and has not looked lost at all. He's very responsible defensively, and he can contribute offensively on the power play. Just a solid D-man, a rookie who's going to keep growing and keep getting better. Who knows where he's going to be in 5 years? Maybe contending for Norris trophies with guys like Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, who seem to have it locked up for the next decade. Moving on to some of the milestones from this week. We mentioned Auston Matthews has reached his 40th goal of the season. Well, he is now the fastest Leaf in franchise history to reach 600 points. Does that stat sound familiar to you? Well, it should be, because just 2 weeks ago, Marner set that record. Marner became the fastest Leaf to 600 points, and then this week, Matthews surpassed his record. Marner reached his 600 point in 548 games, and then this week, Matthews did it in 527 games. And I'm sure he's not stopping there in terms of breaking franchise records for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Moving over to the Colorado Avalanche, Cale Makar has become the franchise leader in goals for a defenseman. A franchise that, although has had a lot of success and a lot of Hall of Fame players in the last 20 years, didn't really have any big name defensemen. You can say guys like Rob Blake or Adam Foote, but Cale Makar actually broke Tyson Barrie's record with his 76th career goal. He also got another goal later in the week, so now he sits at 77 career goals, which is a franchise record for the Colorado Avalanche. Of course, it's going to keep going up with Cale Makar not going anywhere and having a long career ahead of him. Nathan MacKinnon set a franchise record with his 24th home game point streak, and then later that week, he tied Bobby Orr for the second longest home game point streak in NHL history at 25 games. And of course, the record holder for that one is none other than Wayne Gretzky. Rolling back to Sam Reinhart, as he also hit a milestone this week. He got his 500th career point. That was earlier on in the week, early in his point streak. He's now at 506 career points. Like I mentioned earlier, he's on a 13-game point streak. And Lars Eller of the Pittsburgh Penguins played his 1,000th game this week against his former team, the Montreal Canadiens. During the warm-ups of his 1,000th game, the whole Pittsburgh Penguins team kind of replicated his warm-up, his stretching routine. Pretty funny to see. And also in that game where Eller played the Montreal Canadiens for his 1,000th game, the Montreal Canadiens hit their own milestone. It was their 7,000th franchise game, the most of all NHL franchises, of course, one of the most historic teams and part of the original six. And then it keeps going. In that game, in Lars Eller's 1,000th game and the Montreal Canadiens' 7,000th game, the Habs scored their 10,000th road goal. Pretty cool to see all those line up, especially Lars Eller being a former Montreal Canadiens. It was destiny. It was fate. Congratulations to Lars Eller. Very big accomplishment. I feel like he did it pretty quietly. Not many people talk about this guy. He's not really a household name, but he's a solid player. He's been around, obviously, for a long time. He got the Stanley Cup clinching goal for Washington back in 2018. He's always been a solid two-way guy, very responsible defensively, gets a lot of defensive zone faceoffs. A solid number 2 center in his prime. Right now, he's probably dropped down to a number 3 center for a good team. Either way, a very important role player for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And of course, I always liked him when he was a Montreal Canadiens. He was one of my favorite players. Like I said, very responsible. He's very rarely a liability on the ice. So again, congratulations to Lars Eller, one of the few Danish players in the NHL. All right, moving on to some pretty significant signings this week in the NHL. The Chicago Blackhawks have extended goaltender Peter Mrazek to a 2-year contract with an AAV of $4.25 million. Not much to say about this contract. He's a solid goaltender, maybe not one that's going to bring you to a cup, but they are a rebuilding team. I don't think they plan on contending or being very competitive in the next couple of years. So, a solid veteran guy to have between the pipes for the next couple of years while they continue to rebuild. The Philadelphia Flyers also signed a 2-year extension to one of their players. Ryan Poehling, former first overall pick, signed a 2-year extension worth 1.9 mil AAV. A solid bottom 6 guy, not going to add much flash to the team, but again, not going to make many mistakes. He's solid defensively. Fun fact about him, he scored a hat trick in his first ever NHL game, but it was also the last game of the season. A couple years back when the Montreal Canadiens were down and out, but on top of the hat trick, he got this shootout winner in that game against the Toronto Maple Leafs. So a good start to the career for him. He definitely slowed down quite a bit. Either way, solid NHLer, solid guy to have in your bottom 6. But much more importantly for the Philadelphia Flyers, they also extended one of their recent stars, Owen Tippett, to an 8-year extension valued at $49.6 million. That carries a cap hit of $6.2 million for the next 8 years. I think this is an incredible signing by Daniel Briere. Tippett has shown some flashes of greatness this year. 2 highlight reel goals we talked about last week. And just in general, a solid guy. He can do a lot. He's a big body, can throw the body around, and he's got wicked skill, wicked speed. I think 6.2 for the next 8 years is a great signing for a guy that can definitely play in the top 6 and possibly even on the first line of a contending team. He may only have 30 points on the season, but the way he plays definitely outshines his numbers. He's only 24 years old. Definitely a guy I would want to have on my team. Former first-round pick from the Florida Panthers. The Philadelphia Flyers acquired him by trading Claude Giroux to the Panthers. We mentioned that last week, how they were kind of going all in that one season. They traded a bunch of their picks for guys like Claude Giroux, like Ben Sherratt. Anyway, Owen Tippett was part of that trade, and it was a great acquisition by Chuck Fletcher and a great extension here by Daniel Briere. And finally, a name we haven't heard in a while, Zach Parise. I remember people used to call him Parise, then I guess he came out and said it should be pronounced Parise. Anyway, Zach Parise signed a 1-year contract with the Colorado Avalanche valued at $825,000. A no-risk signing for the Colorado Avalanche. A good depth player, a veteran. He's been around for a long time. Used to be a superstar player. Obviously slowed down quite a bit. He is 39 years old. He does have playoff experience. He made it to the Stanley Cup Finals with the New Jersey Devils back in 2012 when they lost to the LA Kings. Again, there's no risk here. There's no reason not to sign this guy. He might be able to play a bit on the power play. He might be able to just add a veteran presence in the locker room. Either way, great signing for the Colorado Avalanche. And that brings us to some trade rumors buzzing around the NHL this week. A name that I was surprised to hear this season, especially after the season he had last year, Andrei Kuzmenko of the Vancouver Canucks. Kuzmenko was a signing out of the KHL last year, a player that nobody really knew. The Vancouver Canucks snagged him, and he had a hell of a rookie season last year, scoring 39 goals and adding 35 assists for 74 points in his first season in the NHL, but unfortunately he dropped off hard this year. He's only got 21 points in his first 43 games for the team. He's been a healthy scratch at times this season. I'm not quite sure what happened to his game. I don't know if he fits into Rick Tocchet's system. Remember last season at the beginning of the year, the Vancouver Canucks had Bruce Boudreau behind the bench. Maybe he clicked more with Boudreau's playing style. Whatever it may be, he's not the same guy that we saw last year. So he's definitely on the trade block, and they're going to be listening to some offers for the skilled Russian. Now here's one that really surprised me. Jake Getzel's name has been thrown around quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, and I don't understand why the Pittsburgh Penguins would want to trade him. I understand that they are out of a playoff spot right now. They're not playing well. It would be tough for them to make the playoffs, but if you trade this guy, you become sellers. You pretty much given up on this season. And when you have a guy like Sidney Crosby, a franchise superstar, a top 10, maybe even top 5 player all time in your lineup, you cannot give up on the season. You cannot become a rebuilding team. Now, you might think, oh, Sidney Crosby's 36 years old, so it doesn't count as a franchise player. Well, Sidney Crosby is having one of the best seasons of his career. He is over a point per game. He's got 27 goals in 46 games this season. That is a 48 goal pace, which would be the second highest of his entire career. So, yes, it does count. It does count, Randy. All right? It does count, Jared. He is a superstar. He's still one of the best players in the league. And on top of that, you have two other Hall of Famers, maybe even a third. Kyle Dubas has to find a way to build around these guys. They got to do something at the deadline. You cannot give up on a season, because if you do, this is probably your last chance with these veterans like Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. So if you're trading on this season, if you become a seller, well, you're done for the next couple of years. You're officially a rebuilding team, and I don't think that's a fair way to treat a guy like Sidney Crosby, who's been with your franchise for 15 years. He's helped you win cups. He's done a lot for you. The least you could do is try to build a team around him, even though it might risk setting you back a couple of years after he retires. Who knows? He might still be able to bring you a deep playoff run. Like I said, he's playing in, and with this guy in the lineup, you always have a chance. There's no giving up in his game, so there should be no giving up on that team. Now, if I'm wrong, if listeners think I'm wrong, so be it. If Kyle Dubas thinks I'm wrong and he goes out and trades Jake Getsel, the only thing I could say is he's got to trade Sidney Crosby too. If Crosby wants to go, he's got to talk to Sidney Crosby, because the least you could do for this guy, like I said, he's given so much to that franchise. This franchise was having a tough time staying profitable before Sidney Crosby came along, so he pretty much saved the franchise. So the least you could do is do right by him. If he wants to go to a cup contending team to get one more shot at a Stanley Cup, you have to trade him to pretty much wherever he wants to go. Maybe he wants to go join Nate in Colorado. Maybe he wants to go join Brad Marchand in Boston. Whatever he says, you have to try to accommodate this guy. It's the right thing to do. It's the least you can do for this franchise player, who in my opinion is a top 5 player all time, and that is even more solidified watching him play this year. Before this season, he was in that conversation. Now, as a 36-year-old, he's breaking records as a 36-year-old, and he's still on the top of his game. I don't know how he's doing it. He is a unicorn. I'm not going to say it. He's an amazing player, but I just want to see this guy in the playoffs again, whether it be with the Pittsburgh Penguins, whether they're able to build around him, or he gets dealt somewhere. I would love to see Sidney Crosby have one more shot at it. He deserves it. We deserve it as fans. And of course, I'd also like to see him play one more time for Team Canada. Have a shot at gold. This one was a hot topic for me. I actually really want to know what you guys think. I'll make a post on Instagram so people could comment. I am curious what people think if the Pittsburgh Penguins should deal Jake Getsel or keep him to build around Sidney Crosby and give him that one last shot at a Stanley Cup. Now, while we're on the topic of trade rumors, I need to correct a big mistake I made in last week's episode. I was talking about the Calgary Flames center Elias Lindholm, but unfortunately I kept on saying Elias Pettersson. Most of my listeners obviously know Elias Pettersson is a player for the Vancouver Canucks, not the Calgary Flames. Big mistake on my part. Apparently I doubled down too. I said it twice. My bad. Randy, I don't know how you didn't catch that. You're on thin ice, bud. Anyway, Elias Lindholm, center of the Calgary Flames, is a big name in the trade market heading into the All-Star break weekend, and as we come closer to that trade deadline, he is definitely the top centerman on the trade market, and because of that, I think he's going to have a high price tag for the Calgary Flames. They could definitely get a first-round pick for this guy. He is a former 40-goal scorer. Of course, that was when he was playing with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, but regardless, he is a great center. He could also play on the wing if needed. Now, apparently one of the biggest issues this year for a lot of GMs is cap struggle. A lot of teams are right up against the cap. Lindholm comes with a 4.85 mil cap hit, which is not insignificant. It's not too much. It's definitely worth the player. It's a great value for that player. But again, a lot of teams don't really have the space to bring in a guy for that price. So they would have to unload some contracts that they don't like, or some, bottom 6 guys that are dispensable. It'll be tough for a lot of GMs to fit him in. Some teams looking for a centerman, the New York Rangers, the Boston Bruins, these are 2 big name teams that are going to make a push, obviously, and need some center depth. Now, if they can't afford Lindholm, the next best center on the list, who comes with a much smaller cap hit, is Sean Monahan of the Montreal Canadiens. Sean Monahan has a cap hit of 1.985, so just under 2 mil, and if the Habs were to retain half of that, a team could get Sean Monahan for practically nothing, and he is a solid player, a great veteran. He's actually having one of the better seasons he's had in a long time. Of course, he has some bad injury trouble, but like I said, he's back playing great hockey this year for a team who's not playing great. The Montreal Canadiens don't have a lot of scorers. He is second on the team in goals with 13 goals and third on the team in points with 35 points. So 35 points in 49 games, not bad at all for a second or even third line center. Again, getting paid under 2 mil, and if the Habs retain, maybe even under a mil. So he would be a great pickup for any team. Could the Habs get a first round pick for him? I think absolutely. Like I mentioned, there's only two big centerman names, Elias Lindholm and Sean Monahan. After that, it drops off quite a bit. So if a team is desperate for a centerman, they're going to have to pay a pretty high price. And if they're not getting Lindholm, they got to go for Sean Monahan. I think a first round pick for a decent centerman with a very low cap hit is very, very feasible. And that would be incredible for the Montreal Canadiens because they received a first round pick just to take Sean Monahan's contract from the Calgary Flames a couple years back. They received Sean Monahan and a first round pick for future considerations, and if they're able to flip him for another first round pick, that would be some masterclass fleecing by Kent Hughes and Jeff Gordon. A lot of eyes also on Calgary Flames defenseman Chris Tanev. The Leafs have been linked to him for quite some time, but now just recently this week, the Ottawa Senators are showing a lot of interest in Chris Tanev. Now, for the Ottawa Senators to trade for him and acquire him this year, to me, makes no sense unless they could guarantee to extend him because he is on an expiring contract and the Ottawa Senators are nowhere near the playoffs. I think the idea is they want him down the road for their, not necessarily their rebuild, but for their push in the next couple of seasons. So if I were them, I would wait until the offseason and hope they can snag him before any other team does. But trading assets just to get him now and possibly lose him in the offseason makes absolutely no sense. All right. Now it's time to move on to some on-ice action, and we gotta start with something that we haven't seen in a long time. The Florida Panthers and the Arizona Coyotes faced off this week. It was the first matchup for these two teams since the Nick Cousins and Jason Zucker incident we talked about a couple weeks ago. Jason Zucker got suspended 3 games for hitting Nick Cousins after he hit a defenseless Valimaki. And although we could kind of have an idea of what was to come in this game, I don't think anyone saw this coming. The first 7 seconds of the game saw 2 fights. The opening draw of the game, right as the puck dropped, what a name for the podcast, the wingers started scrapping. And after that big heated fight, couple of seconds later, after the next puck drop, another fight. This is some 90s hockey stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, Randy, but I haven't seen this since the Calgary Flames and Vancouver Canucks had that line brawl in the opening faceoff of the game when John Tortorella stormed their dressing room after the game. That is some stuff that the fans love to see. Of course, if all the players remain safe, nobody gets hurt. That is just entertaining hockey. So I love to see that this week. Apparently, fights are at a decade high. I haven't actually seen the numbers, but I'm honestly not that surprised. A lot of scraps this year in the NHL. Now, if we rewind a couple of days for the Arizona Coyotes, they hosted the Pittsburgh Penguins, and we saw another thing that we haven't seen in quite some time. The Arizona Coyotes were up 3-2, and there was a delayed penalty for the Coyotes. So, of course, the Pittsburgh Penguins pulled their goalie to try to score on that delayed penalty. Well, Chris Letang dropped it to a Evgeny Malkin, who tried to handle the puck with one stick, and unfortunately, the puck went into their own net. We haven't seen an own goal since, I think, Patrick Kane scored, again on a delayed penalty when he passed it to the point from his own zone and it went all the way into his own net. Something we don't see often, something that the players must feel terrible doing, of course. And in this case, that effectively ended the Pittsburgh Penguins' chance at coming back as the Coyotes added another empty netter after that goal and won the game 5-2. That goal kind of sums up the season for the Pittsburgh Penguins so far. Things are not going well, but whatever you do, do not trade Getzel. Don't give up. Another funny own goal that comes to mind, maybe a good 10 years back, Ryan O'Byrne for the Montreal Canadiens. They were up by 1 goal against the New York Islanders, and Ryan O'Byrne put it into his own net, again on the delayed penalty, tied the game up, and then the Islanders went on to win in a shootout. So that own goal costed the Habs a sure point, as I'm pretty sure there was only a couple minutes left in the third period until Ryan O'Byrne helped the Islanders tie it up, and then they ended up winning. Now, a couple more unfortunate incidents on the ice. Ilya Sorokin. Now, this I should have mentioned last week, actually. It happened 2 weeks ago. But Ilya Sorokin, goaltender of the New York Islanders, slid back towards his net to hug the post, as goalies do, and his skate blade clipped the post, and his skate blade popped out of his skate. Now, way back, one of the first episodes of this podcast, I talked about how the new technology in skates, though they are very convenient for trainers to quickly pop off the blade, replace it with a new one, or whatever they need to do, They seem to be malfunctioning quite a bit. We've seen a lot of skate blades pop out of the skates mid-play. This season alone, we've seen at least 3 now. And for it to happen to a goaltender, Ilya Sorokin, he was no longer able to push off his right foot, so he couldn't slide across the crease to make the save. And then a wide open goal for the Winnipeg Jets, and they ended up winning that game by 1 goal. So that honestly costed the New York Islanders the game. So technology, although it is improving, it's not quite there yet. Another quick tough scene on the ice this week. The New Jersey Devils head coach Lindy Ruff was struck by a puck. He had to leave the game. Now, thankfully, it was only a little deflection. It wasn't a very hard shot. He was okay later in the game, but he did leave the bench. Bit of a scary scene for the team, I'm sure. And going back to the Islanders, Patrick Roy returned to Montreal for the first time as the bench boss of the New York Islanders, only to unfortunately lose that game by a 1 goal margin. His Islanders actually did storm back from a 3-0 deficit to tie it up, only for Sean Monahan to get the game winner late in the third. But one thing that I found was pretty funny is Patrick Roy was fully shaved. Now, if you've seen him with the Quebec Ramparts, he's been rocking a beard for quite some time. But of course, Lou Lamoriello has his rules. He doesn't allow any of his players or staff to have facial hair, which I find very strange, especially nowadays. But anyway, Patrick Roy fully shaved. Kind of got the baby face going. It was pretty fun to see. And before that game, the Habs put on a nice tribute for Patrick Roy. It was very nice. He clearly enjoyed it. Got a tiny bit emotional. Good on the Habs to do, especially considering the way he left that franchise. And in that same game, we saw one of the dirtiest hits of the season. Brendan Gallagher of the Montreal Canadiens elbowed Adam Pelech to the face, received a major penalty for it, was kicked out of the game, and then subsequently received a 5-game suspension. Now, a lot of people on the internet are surprised that it was only 5 games, and I don't blame them. I love Brendan Gallagher. He's one of my favorite players, but that was a very, very dirty hit. One of the dirtiest hits I've seen all season. I don't know what he was thinking. He's not a dirty player. He's never gotten suspended before, but this was bad. This was something that may have been allowed back in the 90s, but it was a clear headshot, a clear elbow, a clear leaving your feet, targeting the guy's head. Very bad hit. Stupid time to do it, too. The Islanders were able to tie up the game on that major penalty, scoring 2 power play goals. Now, why was it only a 5-game suspension? It could be because he's not a repeat offender. One very, very stupid, I guess, rumor is going around on the internet that it's because George Peros was his former teammate. That is obviously ridiculous. There's no way George Peros went lenient on him because they used to play together. If you remember, a couple years back, Andrew Cogliano was the Iron Man of the NHL, and his streak was broken by a 1-game suspension given by George Peros, and they used to be teammates, and apparently they were roommates. So clearly they were good friends, but George Peros did not let that get in the way of business, of his job. He had to give Cogliano the 1-game suspension, which ended his Iron Man streak. So there's no way Gallagher's suspension was 5 games because George Peros used to play with them and they're buddies and he went easy on them. That is a ridiculous thing to say. Nonetheless, very bad hit, and he's well deserving of that 5-game suspension. Another elbowing that led to a suspension over in New York. Captain Jacob Trouba was suspended 2 games for elbowing Pavel Dorofeyev. Trouba, obviously known for throwing some big hits. A couple episodes back, I said that Trouba's not a dirty player. I don't think he meant any ill will when he high-sticked someone. I forget who it was, but he pretty much whacked someone in the head with a stick. And one of my buddies ripped me apart, and he made some good points. He sent me some videos of Trouba throwing some borderline hits. Again, I'm not saying I don't think he's a dirty player, but to say he's, I never use the word clean either. But anyway, he plays on the edge. He's definitely not innocent, and he's very, very far from a Lady Bing player, but I still think he's not dirty. Anyway, regardless, he was given a 2-game suspension for this hit. We're not done with the elbows this week. Tyler Myers was fined $5,000 for elbowing Sean Corrali in the head. Wasn't a super dirty hit. Tyler Myers didn't really raise his elbow, but that's what happens when you're a giant. Tyler Myers is like 6'7", and going into the boards, he did clip Sean Crowley in the head with his elbow, and as we know, that is against the rules, so a fine was deserving. No suspension, I'm totally fine with that. And finally, one hit that left the player bloody, although wasn't suspendable. Jonathan Huberdeau ran Jack Roslovic from behind, and Roslovic, went face into the boards, came up quite bloody, more bloody than you would think. Actually, it looked like he had a big cut on his face. There was blood dripping down his nose, his cheeks. It looked bad, but apparently it wasn't suspendable. Now, we've been talking about hits from behind for quite some time. Some of them are real bad, some of them not so bad. A lot of them, I think the onus is on the player taking the hit. In this particular case, I think Jonathan Huberdeau should not have hit him where he did. He didn't turn at the last second. He clearly was facing the boards, ready to take that puck that was wrapping around the boards, and Huberdeau ran him in the numbers anyway. I wouldn't have been surprised if he got a 1 or 2 game suspension or even a fine. Again, Huberdeau is not a dirty player. He immediately kind of looked up at the sky or put his arms up like, shit, I didn't mean to do that. That was stupid. He knew what he did. Anyway, dirty hit. It was definitely worthy of the penalty. I'm okay, no suspension. I'm okay, 1 suspension. Whatever George Peros deemed, and he went with no suspension. All right, now one more nice thing to note before we jump into our good, bad, and ugly segment. Wayne Simmonds has announced his retirement from professional hockey. Wayne Simmonds has had quite the career, being drafted by the LA Kings back in 2007. However, he was traded to the Philadelphia Flyers after only 3 seasons for Mike Richards, and he played the majority of his games and the best hockey of his career for the Philadelphia Flyers. He is a multi 30 goal scorer, 263 goals, 263 assists, 526 points, and 1,313 penalty minutes in 1,037 games played. A great career for the kid out of Scarborough, Ontario. Good job for Wayne Simmonds. Congratulations on a long, good career, and enjoy the rest of your retirement. All right, now it's time for a fan favorite segment. You know what it is. This week's good, bad, and ugly. Now, I will say there were a lot more bad and ugly headlines around the NHL this year, or around the hockey world, I should say. So there was a few I could have fit in here. I ended up squeezing in just 2. Actually, I kind of combined 2 at the end. But anyway, let's start off on a good note with our good for this week, and that is someone who really, really does not get enough credit. In fact, the opposite. He gets booed every time the fans see him. That is Gary Bettman, commissioner of the NHL. He is our good for this week because he is officially the longest serving commissioner of any of the major 4 sports leagues in North America. He's been the commissioner of the NHL for 31 years, my entire life, and love him or hate him, you cannot deny that this guy has done a tremendous job growing the game and growing the league. When he first became commissioner of the NHL, there were only 24 teams, and now, after 30 years, he's helped the league expand to a 32-team league, which is tied with the NFL for the most teams in all these major 4 sports leagues, and they're already talking about expanding to a 33rd and maybe 34th team. Now, I hope they don't do that, at least for some time, because I don't want the game to get watered down, and it's already hard enough to win a cup, and I need my team to win a cup before I die. Either way, Gary Bettman's done a great job at growing the game, a game that really wasn't on the radar in a lot of American cities, and we can see places like Vegas and even Seattle are thriving with their new teams. They're huge hockey markets. Vegas being the first professional sport in that city, they're now considered a hockey city. So great job to Gary Bettman. He deserves a lot of credit. Now, the only thing that I don't love him for, and I know it's not just his fault, but the professional hockey players not being in the Olympics for the past 2 Olympics really, really pisses me off. I'm sure it pisses off a lot of fans. Again, not just his fault. The IOC, the IHF, whatever, all of them need to sort something out to get our pros back in the Olympics. Now, for our bad for week 16, that is the LA Kings. My God, are they bad. Early on in the season, they looked like one of the best teams in the league. They had some amazing defensive metrics. They were so good, one of the scariest teams in the Western Conference in that strong Pacific Division. But my God, what a fall from grace. In their last 14 games, the LA Kings are 2-7-5. And that led to veteran defenseman Drew Doughty to call out the team by saying that some players on the team care more about their individual stats than winning games. Now, he didn't name anyone particularly, but a lot of speculation. You could probably figure it out yourself. He likely means Pierre-Luc Dubois, who has been a problem player everywhere he goes. He has that infamous shift in Columbus where he put absolutely zero effort. He got sent to Winnipeg Jets where he thought maybe he found a new home, and then after only a couple of years, he demanded a trade and did so pretty early on in the season where they had to hold him for the whole season knowing that he was going to leave in the offseason. He did not want to resign even though he was an RFA. Just a weird way to do it. He seems like a problem player, and now that he's in LA, you thought LA had some of the best center depth with Kopitar, Danault, and now Pierre-Luc Dubois. Well, Dubois is having an atrocious season. He's only got 20 points in 47 games. And does anyone remember what he signed for? Forget what they traded to get him, but he signed for 8 years at $8.5 million. And right now he is not playing nearly well enough to be earning that much money. The LA Kings are struggling big time and they got to figure something out, but for now they are my bad. And moving on to the ugly, a very, very ugly time for Hockey Canada. And like I said, I'm putting two things into one. Let's start with Hockey Canada. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast already know about the incident back in 2018 with the World Junior team. There was a girl who filed a lawsuit for being sexually assaulted by, initially, I think there was 8 players involved. They've narrowed it down to 5. This week, the London police have told 5 players from that team to surrender. Now, they have not been charged yet, and at the time this news came out, we did not really know the 5 players. However, before this, over a span of a couple of days, some young Canadian players were taking leaves from their team for personal reasons. First, Dylan Dubé requested a leave from the Calgary Flames, then Carter Hart from the Philadelphia Flyers, then Michael McLeod and Cal Foote from the New Jersey Devils, and then Alex Formenton, who's playing over in Europe, came back to London. These 5 players have surrendered themselves to the police. They are clearly under investigation. Now, just this morning, it came out that the trial will likely not be scheduled until before 2026. Now, I personally do not know exactly if that means that they cannot play in the NHL until then. I don't know what's going to happen with them for now. Of course, they are not with their teams. They are in London, speaking with their lawyers, doing whatever they got to do. There's not much I can say about this. We don't know what happened. It's not right to point the finger until we know for sure. Of course, we're not going to defend these guys because it doesn't look good. Whether they're innocent or not, they're in a very, very tough situation that nobody should ever get themselves into. I hope. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I can't say I hope they're innocent because then I feel bad for this girl. I can't say I hope she's right. Who knows? It's a touchy subject. I can't really get involved in. All I know is these guys are not with their teams, and there's a good chance they may not be back for a long time. Now, one thing I can say that I want, and that is for former NHL player Mike Ribeiro to get what he deserves, and I'm pretty sure that's jail time. Former NHLer Mike Ribeiro, who played with a number of teams, the Montreal Canadiens, the Dallas Stars, the Nashville Predators, and the Arizona Coyotes, was indicted on 3 charges last year, 2 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of attempted sexual assault. The alleged assaults happened back in 2021, and then just this week, a 4th woman came out to say that Mike Ribeiro assaulted her as well. Mike Ribeiro is now facing up to 50 years in prison. I'm saying some reports that it's looking more likely that he serves 20 years in prison. Whatever it may be, he clearly deserves to be locked up. I'll be honest, when he played on the Montreal Canadiens, I didn't love him. He always seemed like a bit of a piece of shit. Obviously, not to this extent. I cannot speak to anything this bad, but I just never liked him. Even in interviews, I remember actually recently he was on the Tony Marinaro podcast, a podcast who covers the Montreal Canadiens, and he was talking about his time with the Habs and how he didn't like Saku Koivu and how Saku Koivu wasn't a good leader. If you talk to any other player, any other interview of players that played for the Habs at the time, they loved Saku Koivu. So clearly something was up with this guy. He didn't have a good attitude. When he got shipped out of Montreal in Nashville, he seemed like a problem guy too. He just never seemed like a guy that people loved having in the locker room. Again, could never speak to anything to this extent. And then for this news to come out in the last couple of weeks that he raped women and that he's, being accused of sexually assaulting women, he just seems like a complete piece of shit that deserves to go to jail. I'm sure more news are going to come with both these headlines, the Mike Ribeiro situation and the Hockey Canada situation. But regardless, both these stories are extremely ugly. There's no room for that in the hockey world, and there's no room for that in our world at all. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. These guys are just terrible people. Mike Ribeiro is a terrible person. The others, we cannot point a finger until we know for sure what happens. But that's our ugly for this week. It's always tough ending on these shitty notes. Let's ramp it up a bit. Let's talk about our weekly trivia before we tune out from this episode. And I got a good one. The Oilers, like we mentioned, are red hot. They are on the second greatest winning streak of all time. If they win one more, they tie the greatest winning streak of all time. They cannot be stopped. Now, here's the question for this week. Only one player in NHL history has been a part of multiple 14-game winning streaks. Name that player. Now, if you think about it, it's not that hard. Because if you, again, without looking it up, don't be a cheater, but just think about the teams that have gone on 14-plus winning streaks. There's not many. And if you think about that, and you could kind of narrow down what player might have played for two of those teams. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for now. There's our trivia question for this week. We are done for week 16. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode. Don't forget to go out and buy a case of Caffrey, the greatest beer they have to offer here in Korea. Thank you all for listening. I hope everyone has a great week. Enjoy the All-Star festivities this weekend. I can't wait for the NHL to start up again. And I can't wait to see if the Oilers can or can't stop.